Alaska doesn't whisper when it arrives. It announces itself with force. And on this night it did more than announce, it buried everything. The flight into Alaska felt routine at first. Clouds thickened beneath the wings, turning from soft gray to a heavy, bruised white. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, calm but cautious, warning of extreme winter conditions ahead. Outside the window the world disappeared. No mountains, no lights, just endless snow swallowing the sky. This wasn't an ordinary winter storm. This was something historic. By the time the plane touched down, Alaska was already locked in chaos. Winds screamed across the runway, snow slammed sideways, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. The temperature plunged far below what most people imagine as cold. This wasn't just freezing, it was punishing. Each breath felt sharp, as if the air itself resisted being inhaled. Juneau, buried. Anchorage, paralyzed. Entire neighborhoods vanished under nearly 10 feet of snow. Roads disappeared. Cars became unrecognizable white mounds. Power lines sagged under the weight. Emergency sirens echoed through the darkness, then faded into the storm. Stepping outside was like stepping into another planet. Snow fell so heavily it erased footprints within seconds. Streetlights glowed faintly, trapped inside halos of swirling ice. The silence between wind gusts was unsettling, a deep, hollow quiet that made Alaska feel abandoned, as if civilization had briefly lost its grip. Locals moved differently here. No panic, no shouting, just steady, deliberate motion, heavy boots, layered clothing, faces covered. This was survival mode, something Alaskans know well, but even for them, this storm felt different. Older residents spoke in low voices about records being broken, about winters they thought they'd never see again. In Juneau, entire streets shut down. Snow piled higher than doorways. Some homes became unreachable, their entrances completely sealed. In Anchorage, traffic froze mid-commute as whiteout conditions erased lanes and intersections. Vehicles were abandoned where they stood, half buried, engines silent. The city slowed to a crawl, then stopped. The storm didn't rage loudly all the time. Sometimes it simply pressed down, hour after hour, relentless. Snow accumulating not in inches, but in feet. Roofs groaned under the weight. Crews worked non-stop, clearing the same roads again and again, only to watch them vanish minutes later. Inside shelters and homes, people gathered around radios, phones, and dim lights. Updates came constantly, warnings, advisories, pleas to stay indoors. Schools closed, airports shut down. Alaska, a place already defined by isolation, became even more cut off from the rest of the world. And yet, there was something strangely beautiful about it. The way the snow transformed everything into a blank canvas. The way the city lights reflected off endless white, turning the night almost blue. The way time seemed to slow, forcing everyone to exist in the moment, to focus only on warmth, safety, and the people nearby. This was not a storm you watched from a window for entertainment. This was a storm you respected. One wrong decision outside could mean frostbite, disorientation, or worse. Nature was fully in control, reminding everyone who truly rules this land. As the night stretched on, the snow kept falling, 10 feet and counting. Records were being rewritten in real time. Alaska wasn't just experiencing winter, it was being reshaped by it. And this was only the beginning. Morning didn't arrive the way it normally does. There was no clear sunrise, no golden light breaking through clouds. Instead, Juneau woke up inside a white tunnel. Snow had erased depth, distance, and direction. Buildings blended into the ground. Hills vanished into the sky. It felt less like waking up in a city and more like emerging inside a snow globe that had been shaken violently all night. In some neighborhoods, doors wouldn't open. Snowdrifts had piled higher than windows, sealing people inside their homes. Residents had to dig tunnels just to reach the outside world. Shovels scraped endlessly against ice-packed walls, every movement exhausting in the sub-zero air. Within minutes, eyelashes froze together. Breath turned into thick clouds that hung motionless before being torn apart by wind. Juneau's streets were unrecognizable. Where roads once curved along the coastline, there was now a smooth, endless blanket of white. Cars were completely buried, not dusted, not covered, erased. Only the tips of antennas or side mirrors hinted that vehicles existed beneath the surface. Snowplows moved slowly, pushing walls of snow taller than themselves, fighting a losing battle against constant accumulation. Emergency crews worked around the clock. Their priority wasn't convenience, it was survival. Clearing paths to hospitals, reaching elderly residents, ensuring shelter stayed accessible. Every call mattered, every delay carried risk. In conditions like these, minutes could decide outcomes. Power outages spread across parts of the city. Darkness came early, made heavier by the storm clouds pressing low over rooftops. Inside homes, generators hummed softly. Candles flickered. Families gathered in single rooms to conserve heat. Conversations stayed quiet, almost respectful, as if raising voices might provoke the storm outside. Despite the danger, moments of human resilience shone through. Neighbors checked on neighbors. Strangers helped dig out driveways without being asked. People shared food, fuel, and information. In extreme cold, community becomes essential. There's no room for ego when nature strips everything down to basic needs. Along the waterfront, the scene was surreal. Boats sat frozen in place, wrapped in thick layers of ice and snow. The sea smoked in the distance, warm water colliding with brutal air temperatures. Snow fell so densely it blurred the horizon, making it impossible to tell where land ended and ocean began. Officials issued urgent warnings: stay indoors, avoid travel, conserve energy. Avalanches became a serious threat as snow loaded onto mountain slopes surrounding the city. Even standing near certain areas carried danger. The weight of 10 feet of snow wasn't just inconvenient, it was destructive. Roof collapses were a real possibility. Crews inspected buildings constantly, listening for cracks, watching for sagging structures. For many residents, this storm awakened deep memories. Stories resurfaced of legendary Alaskan winters from decades ago. Storms spoken about like folklore. Elders shook their heads, saying they hadn't seen snowfall like this in their lifetimes. Records confirmed it. Juneau was experiencing one of the most intense snow events in its history. The psychological effect was just as powerful as the physical one. Days blended together. White dominated everything: sky, ground, buildings. Without contrast, time felt suspended. People lost track of hours, relying on schedules and alarms instead of sunlight. The storm forced everyone inward, both physically and mentally. Yet there was beauty hidden inside the hardship. Snow muffled sound, creating a deep stillness between wind gusts. When the storm briefly eased, the city appeared untouched, pristine, almost sacred. Trees bowed under the weight, branches sculpted into frozen art. Street signs peeked out like relics from another world. But the calm never lasted long. Another wave of snow would roll in, thick and fast, reclaiming whatever ground had been gained. Juneau wasn't just enduring the storm, it was surrendering to it, moment by moment. And as Juneau struggled to breathe beneath the snow, another major Alaskan city was bracing for impact. Anchorage was next. Anchorage didn't vanish quietly. It froze mid-breath. The storm arrived fast, riding in on brutal winds that funneled through streets and open spaces, turning snowfall into horizontal sheets of ice. Morning commuters found themselves trapped in a city that no longer obeyed traffic rules or schedules. Lanes disappeared. Signals became meaningless. The familiar rhythm of Alaska's largest city collapsed under the weight of snow and cold. Cars stalled everywhere. Some drivers abandoned vehicles when tires lost grip entirely, leaving them stranded in place like frozen artifacts. Intersections clogged. Buses stopped running. Within hours, Anchorage transformed from a functioning urban center into a gridlocked expanse of white. Emergency broadcasts urged people to stay off the roads, but for many, the warning came too late. Temperatures plunged further as the storm intensified. Wind chills dropped to dangerous levels, cutting through even heavy winter gear. Exposed skin burned within seconds. Frostbite warnings weren't suggestions. They were urgent commands. Survival depended on preparation, awareness, and restraint. Snowplows fought relentlessly, but the scale of the storm overwhelmed even Alaska's hardened infrastructure. Crews cleared main arteries repeatedly, only to watch them vanish again under fresh accumulation. Snowbanks grew taller than vehicles. Parking lots turned into featureless plains. The city's edges blurred as open spaces and neighborhoods blended together. Inside hospitals, staff worked extended shifts as conditions outside deteriorated. Slips, falls, cold exposure, and storm-related injuries increased. Ambulances moved carefully, sometimes escorted by plows just to ensure safe passage. Every trip carried risk. Every delay mattered. Residential areas faced their own battles, roofs strained under the immense weight of snow. Residents climbed carefully to clear accumulation, knowing that one wrong step could mean serious injury. The sound of shovels striking ice echoed through neighborhoods, a constant reminder that the storm demanded effort from everyone. Power outages rolled through parts of the city, plunging homes into darkness. Heating systems became lifelines. Those without reliable heat sought warming centers set up by the city. Inside, the air was heavy with damp clothing, quiet conversations, and shared fatigue. Strangers sat side by side, united by the same concern, staying warm long enough for the storm to pass. Anchorage's skyline, normally defined by mountains in the distance, disappeared completely. The Chugach Range faded into a white void, erased by snow and low clouds. Without landmarks, even locals struggled with orientation. Familiar routes felt foreign. The city's scale shrank to whatever could be seen within a few dozen feet. As night fell, the storm showed no signs of mercy. Snow continued to fall, thick and steady, piling higher by the hour. Streetlights cast long, distorted shadows across drifts that looked more like dunes than streets. The wind howled between buildings, carrying loose ice that stung like needles. Social media filled with images that felt unreal, front doors buried to the handle, vehicles reduced to smooth white domes, neighborhoods accessible only by foot. Some photos were beautiful. All of them told the same story. Anchorage was under siege. Yet, resilience remained. Volunteers helped clear paths. Local businesses offered shelter and hot drinks. People checked on elderly neighbors and shared updates when power and cell service allowed. In Alaska, survival isn't individual. It's collective. Meteorologists confirmed what everyone already felt. This storm was historic. Snowfall totals climbed toward records that hadn't been touched in generations. What made it worse was the duration. This wasn't a single blast. It was wave after wave, refusing to let the city recover. Anchorage wasn't just dealing with snow. It was dealing with exhaustion, physical, mental, emotional. Each hour demanded energy, patience, and caution. Mistakes carried consequences here. And still the storm wasn't finished. As Anchorage struggled to hold itself together, the true scale of Alaska's crisis was becoming clear. This wasn't just about two cities. It was about an entire state pushed to its limits. As the storm expanded, it became clear this wasn't a local emergency. It was a statewide crisis. Alaska's vast distances, already challenging under normal conditions, turned into barriers that felt almost insurmountable. Highways closed, bush planes were grounded, ferries stopped running. Communities scattered across wilderness suddenly found themselves completely isolated. Supply chains strained immediately. Grocery shelves thinned as deliveries were delayed indefinitely. Fuel became a priority concern in remote towns where heating depended on regular shipments. Officials urged conservation, reminding residents that help might not arrive quickly. In Alaska, weather doesn't just slow life, it decides when life moves at all. Rural villages face some of the harshest conditions. With limited infrastructure and fewer resources, heavy snowfall and extreme cold carried greater risk. Snow buried runways, cutting off air access, the lifeline for many communities. Without flights, medical evacuations became nearly impossible. Clinics prepared to handle emergencies on their own, knowing assistance could be days away. Search and rescue teams remained on high alert. Even experienced outdoorsmen were warned against travel. Whiteout conditions erased trails, landmarks, and orientation. One wrong turn could mean becoming lost within minutes. Hypothermia didn't announce itself loudly. It crept in quietly, stealing strength and judgment. Across the state, avalanches triggered as massive snow loads shifted on mountain slopes. Authorities closed high-risk areas and urged people to avoid backcountry travel entirely. The beauty of Alaska's wilderness turned dangerous overnight. What usually attracted adventurers now demanded distance and respect. Communication became fragile. In some regions, cell service flickered or disappeared entirely. Radios became essential tools, connecting people to weather updates and emergency instructions. For those accustomed to constant connectivity, the silence was unsettling. For longtime Alaskans, it was a reminder of how quickly modern convenience can vanish. Despite the isolation, coordination continued behind the scenes. State agencies worked non-stop, tracking conditions, prioritizing resources, and planning responses for when the storm finally weakened. National Guard units prepared for deployment where access allowed. Every decision carried weight: timing, fuel, weather windows. Inside homes, routines shifted. People layered clothing indoors to conserve heat. Meals became simpler. Families slept in shared rooms to stay warm. Children adjusted to school closures, turning snowed-in days into quiet adventures within confined spaces. Laughter surfaced occasionally, a small but powerful act of defiance against the storm outside. The psychological toll spread just as widely as the snow. Endless white landscapes blurred days together, creating a sense of timelessness. Without normal schedules or social movement, anxiety grew. People worried about elderly relatives, about supplies, about how long the isolation would last. In Alaska, storms test not only physical endurance, but mental resilience. Yet even in isolation, stories of cooperation emerged. Pilots volunteered when conditions allowed. Locals with heavy equipment helped clear access routes. Communities shared resources without hesitation. In extreme environments, survival depends on collective responsibility. Weather experts warned that the storm system feeding Alaska was unusually persistent. Cold air locked in place, moisture continuously cycling through, producing snowfall far beyond seasonal norms. Climate patterns were shifting, they explained, creating storms that were stronger, longer, and harder to predict. For many, this realization was unsettling. Alaska has always been extreme, but this felt different. Familiar patterns no longer applied. Records meant little when new ones kept being broken. As the storm finally began to show signs of weakening in some areas, the damage and the challenge ahead became clear. Digging out would take weeks, repairs would take longer. Life wouldn't simply snap back to normal. It always had. And as the snow slowly eased, one final question remained. What does survival look like after the storm? The storm didn't end with a dramatic moment. There was no sudden silence, no clear signal that the danger had passed. It simply loosened its grip, hour by hour, allowing Alaska to breathe again. Snowfall lightened, winds softened. For the first time in days, the world felt still, not frozen, but waiting. When people stepped outside, the scale of what had happened became undeniable. 10 feet of snow reshaped everything. Neighborhoods looked unfamiliar, carved into narrow corridors by shovels and heavy machinery. Streets turned into canyons of ice. The effort to reclaim daily life began immediately, and it was exhausting. Cleanup wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Residents dug out vehicles that hadn't moved in days, unsure if engines would even start. Roofs were carefully cleared, layer by heavy layer, listening for stress and cracking beneath the snow. Businesses assessed damage. Families took inventory of supplies and energy, realizing how close some had come to running out. In Juneau and Anchorage, recovery crews worked around the clock. Snow removal became a full-scale operation, prioritizing hospitals, emergency routes, and supply access. Mountains of snow were hauled away, dumped and relocated, just to make room to function again. What had fallen in days would take weeks to fully clear. Yet alongside fatigue there was pride. Alaska had faced a historic storm and endured. There were no mass evacuations, no collapse into chaos. People adapted, helped each other, and held steady. That resilience wasn't accidental. It was learned through generations of living where nature never compromises. Conversations shifted quickly, from survival to meaning. Was this a once-in-a-lifetime storm, or a glimpse of a new normal? Scientists continued analyzing data, pointing to changing climate patterns and warming oceans feeding colder air systems. For many Alaskans, These discussions weren't abstract. They were personal. Weather here isn't just background. It defines life. Children returned to school with stories they'd tell forever. Adults carried new respect for preparation and caution. Emergency kits were restocked. Plans were reconsidered. Everyone had learned something about limits, about community, about how thin the line can be between routine and crisis. As days passed, beauty returned in quieter ways. Freshly carved snowbanks reflected sunlight like glass. The air felt cleaner. Mountains reappeared on the horizon, sharp and stunning against clear blue skies. Alaska, battered but unbroken, revealed itself again. Not just for its records, but for the way it tested an entire state and how that state responded. Alaska didn't conquer the storm, it endured it. And in doing so, it reminded the world what resilience truly looks like at the edge of civilization. In a land where winter rules, survival isn't about control. It's about respect, preparation, and community. That lesson, written in 10 feet of snow, won't be forgotten. Days after the storm, Alaska settled into a rare kind of quiet. Not the threatening silence that comes before danger, but the earned stillness that follows endurance. Snow no longer fell, winds rested. What remained was a landscape permanently altered, and people changed with it. Footprints marked narrow paths between homes. Smoke rose steadily from chimneys. Life restarted in fragments, cautious, slower, more intentional. Every cleared driveway felt like a victory. The storm had stripped away routine and replaced it with gratitude. In conversations across the state, one phrase kept returning. We were lucky. Lucky to have power when others didn't. Lucky to have neighbors. Lucky to have known what to do. Alaska doesn't romanticize survival, it respects it. And this storm reinforced why preparation here is not optional, but cultural. The snow will melt eventually. Records will be broken again someday. But the memory of this winter, of 10 feet of snow, of isolation, of resilience, will stay longer than the cold ever could. Alaska moves forward, the only way it knows how.